Hi everybody, Rachel here from Rachthestamper.com, and today I'm going to show you 4 cards that we're going to use with the Merry Moose bundle. So this has come back again in the holiday catalog. It's on page 27. This is actually a returning bundle from last year, so you still can actually get it at the returning bundle price. So they haven't done that before, so you can get both of these together for 10% off. The Moose Punch was so popular last year. As a matter of fact, it did sell out, so I'm really glad that this is back. But what we're going to do is we're going to make 4 cards, and they all are really easy, but they're going to be a really simple card to a stepped up card, but none of them really require a lot of work. So you're going to get 4 different cards of the same theme out of this video today. Now you also will see that you have a couple other card examples here that they shared with you. So this one here uses real red cardstock and the buffalo plaid background stamp. They used black ink, so you could use that for any of these. And then they just I don't know if they actually did this with scissors, so they flagged the ends with scissors. You probably could also use the banner triple punch depending on how large you made it. But we have another really nice card here with a scene, and then we have this other one really simple. So lots of simple cards, and you could make this into a sympathy card, into a masculine birthday card, so lots of things you could do. So for my card today, I'm actually using one other thing, and this is the Plaid Dsp. So the piece I have, I'll show you in a minute, but this paper comes 6 by 6, and there's lots of different color plaids in here, different themes. I think there's one more under there. So there's all those, and then when you flip it, you have all different ones. So lots of different plaids. I think this is my absolute favorite paper because I love plaid. You can use it for so many different things. So the piece we're going to be using today is going to go more with our theme. So the other side is black and white, but I really like this side. It's like a tartan plaid if I am not mistaken. So we're going to be using some of this. Everything we're going to use the exact same base. So it's going to be really simple. And I designed these cards myself. Sometimes I get some inspiration from other places, and sometimes I try to think of things on my own. What I'll do is I'll start with an idea and then kind of pump it up or down from there. We are going to use the second largest stitched circle. Now, we're going to start this one way and kind of elevate up from it. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways you can do it. For each one of these cards, we're going to be using a crumb cake base. So we're going to start with our simpler card. So basically what we're going to do is we have our crumb cake base, we have a stitched circle, and we're going to make this our simple card, okay? So this is going to be card 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick with crumb cake ink, and then we're going to use early espresso for the moose. So I'm going to do the moose first. And the reason being is I want to show you a tip. So sometimes when you have stamps like these where they're very solid, you can get so it doesn't really ink up exactly how you think it's going to. So I'm going to show you on a piece of scrap first. So if you were to ink up your moose and you stamp him, sometimes you'll notice there's a couple little spots that don't really ink exactly how you think they're going to. They don't really ink quite fully. So a nice trick for that, and I'm going to show you what to do. So you are going to want to make sure you have something to clean off your stamp, is you're going to actually ink your stamp first with Versamark. Doesn't have to be super wet, but you want to ink it up with Versamark. Then you're going to ink it with your color. So in this one, we're going to use Early Espresso, and I'm going to try my best to make sure I get this centered. And then we're going to ink this onto our already pre-cut, and again, that was the second largest stitched circle. So let's pop this off. Should be better. And look how much more solid that is. Now granted, I know this was on a piece of copy paper, but you'll get a much more solid image. So if you ever have trouble with getting your solid stamped images to fully ink, try doing that first. The Versamark doesn't hurt anything with your stamp pad or your ink pad that you're using, so kind of keep that in mind, but it really does help when you have these solid image stamps. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just for this moose. It could be for anything. Okay, so for this first one, what we're going to do is I've already mounted the tree, and we're going to stamp this with crumb cake, and I just re-inked this, but I also need to get a new ink refill. I think this is the first ink refill I've ever used to the very bottom, so I need to get a new one of those. So I'm going to stamp this a couple times. Hopefully it'll be inky enough. Stamp over here. And just without re-inking, I'm going to stamp one more so we have a little shadow of one in the background. So that will be our base. And then I think I might do the same thing with going with the early espresso. So basically for this card, we're going to just put our punched, stitched circle there. And we will do Happiest of Holidays. We'll make this one just a simple card. So, Happiest of Holidays. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just ink this up. So I'm kind of just sitting him there so I know where I want him. Make sure this isn't really in a line. Just check that once more. For some reason this little piece here is going up. Let me fix my stamp. Okay. So I'm just going to stamp this down here at the bottom. Okay, so since we're making this simple, you could do one of two things for this. This is a super easy, simple card. You could either pop this up on a dimensional just to give a little bit of something, or you can just glue it directly down. So since we're going with just a really simple card, I'm just going to glue this directly down. So here is going to be card 1. Just like that. Okay, so there's 1. So we have that. Now, card 1, really easy, right? So we're going to do the same thing again for card 2. Take this up just a notch. So I'm going to go ahead and open my crumb cake ink. I think I'm just going to leave this open from now on. I'm going to stamp my trees. All right, there is that. Now, if you wanted to, you can even add a star. I will say I'm going to keep it in the same ink, just so you have a little consistency. So add a little star to that. But again, nothing really crazy. We're still sticking with the same theme. Okay, now one other thing, and I did do this ahead of time, but I'm going to do this after the fact. So this mousse, I actually punched out, but I did him on white when I was originally setting this up, and then I switched to vanilla. So I do have a vanilla scrap. So we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. So we're going to use our Versamark, ink up our mousse. Okay. And then we're going to go with our early espresso. Okay, and put him over here. Just using a little scrap. So I'm going to press him. Give it a minute for the ink to transfer. Oh, I missed a little bit, but that's okay. You're going to wait a little bit longer, so mine's just a teeny bit dark. Now, one other thing you could do here, you could take your early espresso marker, if you have one, and you could just fill this in just a little bit, just to make that a little bit darker. One other thing, if you don't happen to have this, you could use a blender pen with your ink and fill it in there. So, a couple different things you could do, or you could restamp it if you want. So, I'm going to line him up. And usually what I do is I'll very gently squeeze this just to make sure I have it lined where I want before I punch. Okay, so here's our mousse. All right. So instead, we're going to do is we're going to put this mousse onto here to pop him up, okay? I am going to use some dimensionals for this. And since this is a vanilla or white, I'm going to use a light dimensional instead of a dark one. So let's put a couple dimensionals. It's funny because any other time I'm looking for dimensionals, all I can find are the tiny ones. So I'm going to just snip one. Story of my life. Okay, so put a little piece of one here. And I'm going to do the same on this one. And a piece of one there. Okay. So I know we don't really have one on his feet, but I think he'll hold up okay. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of center this just as I did before. Just like so. Okay, so we have that. So same thing again. So it's really just a little bit of a step up. So just to be cohesive for this first one, we'll keep the same sentiment. So we'll just do the same thing again. Happiest of holidays. All right. And since we popped up the moose, I'm just going to glue this guy down. Okay. So really, again, not a huge step up. Okay, but we have a little bit of something extra. We added the stars. We punched out a moose and put them on there, so it gives you a little bit of an extra something. Okay, so now for this next one, we're going to add some of that DSP. Okay, so let me slide these two over. So we're still going to do the same thing again with our trees. Okay, so I'm going to stamp our trees. Put that one there. Now for this, I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to add, just for a teeny bit of color, I'm going to use the bumblebee, and I'm going to stamp a star. And granted, it's not a whole lot of color, but it does add a little something. So we have our star on there. Then we also are going to add our piece of DSP. This is just a 1/2 inch piece of DSP. Okay, we also have another circle here, so we're going to put that there, and we just need to do one more moose. So same thing again with our moose. Going to just ink him in Versamark. Ink him in Early Espresso, and just press him. Okay, and I'm going to punch him out. Just like so. Okay, same thing again. Let me just grab a couple dimensionals. Oops. I'm going to just snip a couple pieces. Him here. Now, just to switch this up a little bit, what we'll do is we're going to change the sentiment for this one. And I'm going to change this one to, I believe this says, have a cozy Christmas. So I just want to make sure this stamp's okay. Feels like this one's just a little, sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but when I do my stamping, a lot of times my words don't seem to be straight. Much better. So I do take the time to go back and fix them. So have a cozy Christmas. All right, and then all we have to do is add these two things on. So I'm going to add my DSP, just adding a little bit of glue. Put this on. It doesn't have to be in any specific area, but just like that. And then just for a little bit of added dimension, I'm actually going to put dimensionals on the back of my circle here. So just 3 is enough. Okay. And also this one's stamped a little light, so it's kind of perfect because it'll just cover a little spot up. Okay, so we're going to fold this. Perfect. So then we have version 3. So let me show you again. So we have our first one, which is just stamped directly. The second one, we popped this up. We added a little bit of stars. And then the third one, we added some of the Bumblebee, we added the Plaid Dsp, and we pop both of these up. Now, for the last one, we're going to actually make this one a little bit more exciting all around because we're going to add a couple different elements to this. So first off, we're going to add some embossing powder. So you're going to want to have clear embossing powder. You could also use white if you wanted to. If you have a specific color you want to use, that's fine. But the white is actually, or the clear, I should say, is going to take on the color of whatever ink we're using. Okay, so that's what we're going for today. So one other thing you're going to need, if you happen to have it handy, if not, you're going to need to grab one, is some sort of an anti-static powder tool. So Stampin' Up! Used to carry an embossing buddy. We don't currently carry this, but hopefully you guys at least have something like this to use. And then the other thing is we're going to bring in our components one more time. So we have the same thing. We have our base card. We have our vanilla circle, we have our piece of Plaid Dsp. Now this one is already punched, and I know that he is a different color, so I'm going to show you one other thing we're going to do instead. We're going to punch this one more time, and we're going to actually use Versamark. So in the meantime, I do apologize, you can't emboss without having a heat tool, and the heat tool does make a little bit of noise, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. I have mine on a embossing tool holder. This is actually available from Crafters Solutions. So what it lets you do is it lets you turn this on, and you can set it somewhere, and then when you're ready, it'll be ready to heat, and you can pick it up and hold it. So I'm going to put this as far out of the way as I can. I know it's still a little noisy, so I apologize, but we're going to do some embossing first, so we'll get that part over right away. So let me move these guys over. Okay, so we're going to do several different pieces of embossing. So we're going to emboss our greeting down here, and we're going to also emboss the trees. And then we're also going to emboss our moose before we punch him out. So it's just going to give us a whole lot of extra dimension with really not a whole lot of extra effort. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this in steps. And I'm going to have my coffee filter to catch my embossing powder. And I have my embossing powder open. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do our tree. Now, since we're doing this on crumb cake cardstock, you could just do it with the Versamark if you like. It's kind of up to you, but you can also do it with the Versamark and the crumb cake. So I'm going to show you what it looks like with both of them together. So you'll ink into your Versamark first, then into your color, stamp, same thing again. And if you go into your Versamark with the ink, it isn't going to really affect your pad. I've done it many times. And stamp. Okay, now, before I move on to adding my sentiment, I'm going to go ahead and add my embossing powder. Okay, so prior to setting this, I'm going to put this away because if not, you don't want to risk heating your powder that you haven't used yet because then it won't heat again, or definitely not as well. So I'm going to go ahead and heat set my trees. And since we have this preheated, it should emboss pretty quickly. Or melt, I should say. Okay, so there you can see the stuff that's powdery is not heated and the shiny is heated. So you just want to move this around. That way it kind of reduces the warping of your cardstock if you keep it moving. Alright, so there's part one. Now, we did say we wanted to go back and add the sentiment at the bottom, so I'm going to just make sure that nothing accidentally got here. I'm going to use the same sentiment, which was, which one do we switch to? Have a Cozy Christmas. So this time I'm going to take my Versamark and my Early Espresso. So I went Versamark first, then Early Espresso. Put this down here at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to take my clear powder and sprinkle over this. Okay, I'm just going to heat this up. This will be really quick. Alright, so we have our clear over crumb cake, and then this is clear over espresso. Okay, now we have to do our mousse. So for the mousse, I'll grab my scrap paper. just going to make sure this is still not staticky. So I'm going to take the mousse and put it into the Versamark. Okay, and then the mousse into the espresso. Then I'm going to stamp him. And I feel like right here in this front hoof and his face, I missed just a little bit. Yep, I did. So I'm actually going to flip it over and try again. Because the powder will pick up no matter what. But you could have just a slight change in the color. So we'll just go again, just to be on the safe side. Okay, and then we're going to pick up our mousse and sprinkle our powder on top. Okay, I'm going to put this back. Now, once you have your mousse stamped and you have sprinkled the powder, you're okay to wait a minute or so. You don't want to wait too long in between the sprinkling. However, you definitely need to heat set this, because basically if you don't, what will happen is the Versamark loses its stickiness and then the powder will flake off. And I did that once by mistake, and I had to go back and do all that hard work over again, because I didn't realize that the powder loses its stickiness and then the powder will just brush off, which kind of is a bummer when you spent all that work. But that was when I was a new stamper. So I try to make sure that I tell people that nowadays, to make sure you heat set it once you've put it on there, because otherwise it will flake away. So I'm giving this just a minute to cool off because it is still a little bit warm. So we'll give that a minute. In the meantime, I am going to go ahead, and you could have done this also, but I just figured we'll do this just as is. I'm just going to stamp the star, and I'm going to stamp this full strength onto all three of them. That is again in the bumblebee, so I did that for those. You could have embossed that if you wanted to as well, so just keep that in mind. I do have our piece of DSP, so let me just hit this here. We'll go ahead and put our piece of DSP on, then we'll punch him out and add him. And then you will have 4 cards of varying degrees of detail with all of the same products. Maybe just added a few extras. So he's nice and cool now. So I'm going to go ahead and slide him in. Now, one other thing, if you ever notice, sometimes if your piece of paper, you can't really slide them in. A good tip is you take a piece of Post-it note or a sticky note and you stick it to the top of whatever you're holding. And then you slide it in. And actually, this might need to be trimmed just a little bit. Yep. This is a little bit too long here. So you slide it in from the top, and it helps you to hold on to your piece. There you go. So we're going to scoot him over just a smidge. Come on, this little piece got wrinkly. I promise you, this does work. It's easier than it looks. Oh my goodness, look, I got through this whole entire video, and this is the part that's holding me up. Crinkly paper. Okay, try this again. There we go. So all you're gonna do is kind of pull this up. So again, I kind of will slightly grip it so I can make sure that it's lined up exactly where I want it. Just like that. Okay, and then I'm gonna punch it, and then you'll have this little piece of sticky on the back. Just pull that off, and that's where we put our other mousse. All right, and then all this rest of this stuff will go into the trash. Now, one other thing we'll do for this one, just to bump it up just a teeny bit more, is I'm going to take a sponge, and I'm going to do this a light color with the crumb cake. I'm just going to sponge the edge. You could sponge the Plaid Dsp as well if you wanted to add a little something to it. So there's that. Pretty simple. And then we're going to just do the same thing with our dimensionals. We're going to add a couple dimensionals to the back of our mousse. Just add a couple more little snip pieces here. Okay. put our mousse fairly centered on there. There we go. And then same thing again, we'll put dimensionals on the back of this one as well. We'll just do 3 is good enough. 1, 2, 3. Easy as that. And then we're just going to pop this right onto that. Perfect. That's a nice press. Now, one other thing you will notice, and this is just another extra step you could take if you choose. Sometimes you'll notice that when you emboss onto the layer that you're using as your card base, it can get a little bit warped. So prior to putting this through, you could have done one of 2 things. Prior to putting this dude on here, you could run the whole thing through your embossing machine with just a piece of printer paper over. It'll flatten it out. Or if you wanted to, what you could have done is to trim down an extra piece of crumb cake cardstock to 4 by 5 1/4, emboss on that, and then layer it onto your base card. So either way would work. But let me show you the cards we made. Let me get all this stuff out of the way so you can see those. 4 very simple cards using virtually all of the same products. Just varying degrees from easy peasy squeezy. Now granted, I know this is a lot of tone on tone, but it's a very simple card. So you have 4 different cards and 4 different levels of, you can work around and do stuff. You could also change the color scheme if you wanted to. You could do soft suede if you wanted a little bit darker. You could change out your plaid, but a really fun and simple card that you could easily mass produce for your holiday card needs. So if you don't happen to have this yet, again, you can get the bundle. It is Merry Mousse and then the Mousse Punch. If you purchase them together in my online store, you can save 10% as a bundle. And you can also, right now through August 31st, use your bonus days coupon if you earned any. So with those, it is $5 off every 50. So if you spend 50, you can use it to redeem for $5 off. There's no limit to the amount you can use at the same time. So if you got a bunch of them, you can use them all together. Again, also, we also use the second largest stitched circle. So this is in the stitched shapes. It comes with ovals, circles, and squares. So I think this is probably one of the most used bundles that I have. I love that. We also added some clear embossing powder to the mousse, to the trees, and to our greeting here. So we did that with 3 different things and made it a little bit more fun. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I truly appreciate the time that you've taken to spend with me. If you have any questions, you can always leave me a comment here on my YouTube video. And if not, you can send me an email at rachthestamper@gmail.com. If you'd like to get any of these supplies or anything else, you can shop my online store 24/7, rachthestamper.stampinup.net. And if you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do, please make sure you click on the bell in the corner of the right lower hand corner. And that way, the next time I make a live video or if I have a pre-recorded video, it will let you know that there's something new in there for you to watch. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.